How you doing? Hey, listen. Why did I? When you're with white people, they go, gosh, you know so many people. I don't know them people, but I'm going to greet them. Because y'all know what happens when you don't greet, right? Try to walk past Aunt Dolores and not greet her. Try to do that and live. Okay? I don't care if you got to run to the... Did you see Aunt Dolores? Have you learned... Or then don't try to not notice folks. Oh, you too good? So we are serious. In Africa, they put a whole new spin on greeting. Right? It's ceremonial to greet. And there's no such thing as sneaking in the back. Everybody is greeted no matter how or when. The meeting is over when it's over. Nobody's late. Okay? So what happens is, you know, I get up and each one of us, you know, my crew has already told me we're not singing. So I'm good. So each one of us gets up and we introduce ourselves. And as we introduce ourselves, the translator gets up. And this is interesting. His name is Gilbert. And Gilbert is the descendant of slaves that were enslaved in South Africa by the Dutch. So we have a similar experience, only he went back and learned all the tribal languages. He didn't just speak Afrikaans. So Gilbert gets up and he starts, and I say, hello, my name is Joy. I'm traveling with a group of women and African American women, and we are trying to develop a corridor with African women, and I just kind of sit on down. Gilbert says, thank you. He gets up and he starts to translate. And then he goes on and on and on. And so my sister, who's in the group, and my niece, they're looking over at me like, I said, I know I didn't say all that, right? And he's going on, and after a while, the people are chanting. And then they start clapping. You know, so I'm like, okay, Gilbert, what'd you tell him, Gilbert? What'd you tell him? Hey, Gilbert, I told him what you said. I said, Gilbert, I know I didn't say all that. He says, oh, okay, well, here's what happened. I was telling them, you know, everything you said, and then when I said African American, you know that some of the village people, when I said that, they got confused, the folks, because they thought all Americans were white. So then I had to explain to them that you were the descendants of the ones that were stolen away. And they started to say, welcome home. Everybody was singing. Everybody. I was toe up. Everybody's singing in the room. My sister's glaring at me like... So this woman is standing over in the corner, and she looks over at me. You know, she walks over, because you know everybody's singing, and I'm sitting there trying to suck it all back, and she grabs me by the hand and she said, did you think we would forget you? She says, I am from Lesotho. Lesotho is my home. If I leave Lesotho for 10 years, Lesotho is still my home. If I leave Lesotho for 50 years, Lesotho is still my home. She says, you are African 300 years from home. She said, you know, we're so proud of you. Don't you know we mourned Martin with you? We mourned Malcolm with you. We just wondered when you were coming back. I was toe up. But I had an experience in Southern Africa, an awakening, a pilgrimage, if you will. And one of the things that I realized is how injured I was. Truly, my own injury. And the first thing I always do is look at the mirror. You know, trust me, a lot of this diagnosis I could tell by me and my family body self. But one of the things that I started to realize was that people's acknowledgement of us. And let me help you understand. I'm not one of those people that think Africa is nirvana, because that's not true. Africa is not nirvana. Africa needs us because Africa's problems are severe. HIV and AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa is destroying Africa. What is going on in Sierra Leone is unmentionable, what they are doing to children. And the rapes in South Africa are horrific. So let's be clear. Africa is not nirvana. But one of the things that I did recognize was how much they could embrace me. And they would say things to me, you know, in all these different languages, but all of it translated to a similar statement. And the statement that it would translate into upon greeting me was, I see you. I see you. That's going to be very important as I talk about my research. But I was touched by that notion of I see you. Acknowledging that you are important enough for me to connect with you. And even Einstein said that the myth of humanity is our perceived disconnection. We are living the lie of disconnection when we are connected. And what happened when I got back home is I was a bit depressed. I came back home to being marginalized and invisible. I came back home to a familiar hostility. And so I stayed in my home a bit, to such a degree that the women that traveled with me would call my sister and say, has she left the house yet? And I had not. So finally one day I had this experience which forces me out of my home. My young daughter runs in and she says, there's a boy outside. He says he's going to beat up Nadine. That's her brother and my son. And he says he's going to pee on the car too. This could happen in the hood. So I had to go outside. So I go outside and there standing in the middle of everything is, you know, these young brothers that are just kind of steady, looking tough. Nobody's over 10 years old. So I walk over to the ringleader and I say to him, excuse me, brother, has my son done something that I need to know about? He said, yeah, I want to know if he got some kind of eyeball problem. I said, what did you say? I said, I know he bionic, so I don't know what he said. I said, what did you say? He said, I want to know if he got some kind of eyeball problem. What he staring at? I said, wait a minute. Are you telling me you want to beat my son up and pee on a car because he was looking at you? Because my son was looking at you, you want to beat him into the ground? He could have been looking at you because he's got a little hoop outside. You know, we had a little basketball hoop. Maybe you want to play one-on-one. He could have been looking at you because maybe you want to go in and play some little video games. He got a little Nintendo in there. Maybe he could have been looking at you because down the street is a park and y'all could go down the park and kick it. He could have been looking at you for anything. Oh. I got a little therapeutic and deep there. You know, but I'm giving them, you know, the same lecture most of you give them. Listen, we got to live in this community. We got to live as a village. We can't hurt each other. We got to protect each other. The whole thing. And then it occurs to me when I go back inside, as I'm formulating what I'm going to look at. What is the research, Joy, that you want to look at? As I'm formulating that, I recognize one of the symptoms of post-traumatic slave syndrome. I recognize something called vacant